everyone. Welcome back to Let's Talk About It. Today it's filling a need, the turning point. I'm Sherry, and today I really want to slow down and go deeper into one of the most important parts of the grooming process, filling a need. Because honestly, I think this is the stage people misunderstand the most. People often think grooming is just someone manipulating a child sexually right away. But grooming usually starts emotionally long before exploitation begins, and I share that all the time. And if we don't understand how groomers feel the needs, we miss one of the biggest warning signs. And honestly, when I look back at my own experience, I can see this stage everywhere. At 15 years old, I couldn't see it, but now I can, and I do talk about it. The person who groomed and later trafficked me was my boyfriend's father. And one thing I understand now is that he learned what emotional needs existed before exploitation ever begins. That's what groomers do. They study people emotionally. I know that sounds uncomfortable and kind of creepy in a way, but it's true. They pay attention to what makes someone feel insecure, what makes them feel lonely, what they're missing emotionally in their world, what they crave, what hurts them, what comforts them, what makes them feel important. And then they slowly step into those emotional spaces. Not all at once. Everything is little by little. And honestly, sometimes it can feel incredibly subtle. So subtle, actually, that you don't see it happening. Sometimes it looks like, wow, this person really understands me. That's why grooming is so psychologically confusing, because the emotional connection can feel very, very real. You know, I've talked in the past about how this is all mind control. And it is mind control, then fear, and then control. Of course, we talk about the 7 steps all the time, but if a groomer who is taking their time to kind of move these chess pieces around on a board to get the person that they feel they're going to make money off of by selling their body, which is trafficking, that they are going to do everything they can to make sure they have a tight mental control on that person before that person even has any idea what's happening to them and has any idea on what to do if once the trafficking starts, there's no way out. I had many needs. I grew up in a good home. I had 2 parents. I never fit any of these narratives that you hear about high risk factors for grooming and trafficking. I was just the middle of 3 girls trying to find my place in the world. You can learn more about my story and how I grew up and how I was groomed in my memoir, Pearl at the Mailbox. But I do know clearly that there were big things that mattered. One was not having a brother. Most people would be like, okay, no big deal, but it was a big deal because there was no one to carry on the family name. And so my groomer knew that, and he filled that need by saying, I will be the brother that you never had. Now, in my mind, I envisioned what that meant. A protector, someone I could go to if people were picking on me, or I just needed, mainly it was like a protector, you know. And my friends always said, why do you want a brother? Because they smell and all this funny stuff. But that was a need for me. I wanted a brother. So my groomer filled that need emotionally. He didn't really do anything to protect me, but he would reinforce that by telling me, hey, remember, I'm the brother you never had. We're good. And so it was, again, an emotional tie that, okay, yay, I have a brother. That need was met. Just also needing to feel accepted by my peers was also very important to me, and that need was met by including me in these parties with kids that were kind of out of my league. You know, there's always a pecking order in high school. You've got your different layers of popular to just kind of there, and I was just kind of there. But I started to mingle with the popular kids. Little did I know that many of the girls were being trafficked, just like myself. But that need was felt and filled. So it's the emotional part. A groomer will play the role of a boyfriend and maybe do it for a long time, and then all of a sudden, gosh, they're short on rent or something comes up and it's like, oh baby, please come on, just do this one time. I'm depending on you. You love me, right? You'll do this for me. And then that opens the floodgates of trafficking, because the intent was really to make money off of that person. So this process goes slow. The emotional bonding, and that's why you hear about trauma bonds a lot with survivors. Even though somebody has hurt them in the grooming and trafficking part, they become so emotionally and sometimes physically dependent upon one person to stay alive that they will defend that person for a very, very long time. For a very, very long time, until they get enough help to start detangling that psychological web in their brain. I know it's intense, but that's how it works. And they become the person you go to. One of the first ways groomers fill needs is by becoming emotionally available. They become the person you talk to, the person who listens, the person who notices your moods, and the person who asks, are you okay? And for teenagers especially, that can feel huge, because at home, you may not get that type of interaction because you're home, and a home is running with many different dynamics. But the person who asks, are you okay? For teenagers, as I said, it's huge. I remember feeling listened to, and honestly, teenagers remember that kind of attention because so many adults unintentionally dismiss them. A groomer often does the opposite. They lean in emotionally. They make the young person feel important. They remember details. They follow up on conversations. And over time, the child or teen starts emotionally attaching to that connection. Not because they're stupid, not because they're weak, but because they're human. We are designed to be emotionally connected to someone, and we naturally move towards people who make us feel seen. So just let that sink in for a second. I'm going to grab a drink of water. A groomer, they make you feel different from everyone else. Another thing groomers often do is make the child or the vulnerable person feel unique or special. And this is huge psychologically. And they intentionally say things to make you feel that way, like, You're mature for your age. You understand me better than adults do. You're not like other girls. You're smarter than everyone else around you. You're special to me. That is building up the person emotionally. Now, to an adult listening, that might sound manipulative, but to a teenager, it can feel very, very validating, especially during adolescence when identity and self-worth are still developing. And honestly, this happened in my own story too. I remember feeling emotionally important, like I mattered and like someone saw me differently than everyone else did for the first time. And that emotional validation becomes powerful because teenagers are naturally trying to figure out, who am I? Do I matter? Am I lovable? Am I important? Am I even seen? And groomers know how to tap into that. As heartbreaking as it is, that's reality. They also feel loneliness. Another huge need groomers feel is loneliness. And loneliness does not always mean someone has no friends or no family. A child can live in a loving home and still, feel emotionally lonely sometimes. I did. Teenagers especially often feel misunderstood. Your hormones are going and your emotions are all over the place, and it's hard to even understand yourself when you're a teen. And groomers know how to position themselves as the only person who gets you, and that's dangerous. Because once someone starts believing they understand me better than everyone else around me, isolation often starts forming emotionally. And isolation doesn't always mean physical pulling away from someone. Sometimes it's emotional separation first. Like a child or a teen slowly begins trusting the groomer more than the trusted adults in their family. That's a massive turning point psychologically. The groomer is shifting their trust and belief in what should be the foundational part of their family to themselves. They create emotional dependency. This is one of the biggest goals in grooming, dependency. The groomer slowly becomes the comfort person, the advice person, the safe person, the emotional support system, and the rescuer. And over time, the victim begins emotionally needing that relationship. That's why people asking, why didn't they just leave, often do not understand grooming psychologically. Because one of the first exploitation escalates, the emotional dependency may already be very strong. And honestly, I think survivors struggle deeply with this later because parts of the emotional attachment felt very, very real. It's a complicated process. You look back and you go, gosh, I thought I loved that person, but they did this to me. That's because human emotions are real, but manipulation can still exist inside emotional attachment. So trying to break that emotional attachment is really hard. And this is one reason why a lot of survivors of human trafficking never take their trafficker to court should the trafficker get arrested, because of that mental control. Let's say, for example, a trafficker gets arrested and the survivor is going through their healing journey, and it's been 5 years before that trafficker is taken to court. And the survivor says, okay, I feel strong enough to go and testify against this person. Just the fact that they have to go back into the same room with the person that emotionally controlled them is very challenging And people don't understand that. In a trafficking dynamic, a lot of times the trafficker has subtle cues like scratching the ear, touching the nose, making a big yawn, something that sent a message to the person that they are trafficking. Get in line, do what I say, I'm going to hurt you. And so when a victim goes into court and they face their trafficker, that trafficker could still use those signals, and it could completely emotionally shatter the victim, who is now the survivor, in there to testify. I can honestly say that in my journey, I had 4 traffickers, and I don't even think to this day I could be strong enough to face them in court. Granted, 2 of them are no longer alive, but that's a huge emotional toll on a survivor who has been abused by someone, controlled by someone. So I applaud tremendously the survivors that go in there and are able to face their trafficker. This is also why I am a lived, experienced expert in the area of trafficking. I get called in and I go and educate the jury about the grooming process, trauma bonding, and the psychological hold that a trafficker can have on their victim. And this has been proven to be successful because we did a case here a couple months ago, actually in January, and the trafficker, the woman victim, was very, very brave and testified against her trafficker. And I came in and educated, and the jury later said because they were educated about the grooming process and the psychological hold, that trafficker was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years. So it's important for people to understand that. So anyway, they filling the needs. Well, the groomer and the trafficker, those needs are intertwined. You've got them being filled during the grooming process. You've got them being filled during the trafficking phase to keep you there. Those needs can be filled through gifts, money, experiences, and sometimes just practical things like clothes, attention, freedom, food, a phone, transportation, experiences, financial help. Sometimes the groomer becomes the person providing things. And when someone begins filling practical needs, the victim may start feeling grateful, indebted, loyal, and protective of the relationship. And groomers often intentionally create that emotional obligation, almost like, look at everything I am doing for you. That dynamic can later become weaponized for control, and often it is. Look at all this stuff that I did for you. Look how maybe I bought something for your family, or you needed books for school. Look at all this stuff that I did for you. You need to pay that back. You owe me. They feel the need to feel safe. This one is really important. Sometimes groomers position themselves as protectors. They become the person who says, I'll take care of you. You can trust me. I would never hurt you. I'm here for you. And honestly, that can become deeply confusing later for survivors because exploitation becomes mixed with emotional comfort. That's part of why grooming creates so much psychological conflict. That person causing harm may also be the person the victim emotionally runs to. That's trauma bonding, and it's very real. They slowly redefine normal. I think this is one of the scariest parts of grooming. Little by little, boundaries change. Conversations become more personal, physical boundaries shift, and secrets start forming. And because it happens gradually, the victim adapts emotionally over time. What would have felt uncomfortable in the beginning slowly starts feeling normal. That's conditioning. And honestly, that is why grooming often goes unnoticed by families too. Because from the outside, the shifts may seem small at first, but underneath, emotional control is growing. This is why grooming is a crime of preparation and intent. This is why I always say grooming is a crime. It is. The exploitation comes later. The emotional groundwork comes first. And honestly, I think society still spends too much time focusing only on the final stage while ignoring everything that happened before it. Because if we only look for exploitation, we miss the warning signs leading up to it, and that's where prevention matters. I wish more people understood this. Children and teens are not asking for it. They want attention, love, validation, or connection. Those are normal human needs. The problem is when someone intentionally manipulates those needs for exploitation. That distinction matters deeply. And honestly, when I look back now at my 15-year-old me, I don't see a girl making bad choices. I see a teenager being psychologically groomed by an adult who understood manipulation far better than she understood danger. That's very different. I think, gosh, my poor me. That adult knew exactly what he was doing, and I didn't see it as danger until I was sold for the first time. So, in closing, I want to thank you for sitting through this conversation with me today. I know this topic is heavy, but I truly believe understanding the psychology behind grooming helps people recognize it earlier. And honestly, that recognition can save lives. So if this episode meant something to you, please share it because these conversations matter. You can also learn more about all that we do at Pearl at the Mailbox, named in honor of the woman who ended my 7 years of trafficking at a mailbox, this amazing woman named Pearl. We can all be a Pearl in some way, and that's by learning and getting educated. And that's so very, very important. We want to stop this, and we want to protect our kids. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.